Well, welcome everybody to our February Alumni Career Paths panel. This month we focused on careers in data science, and we're joined by three alumni at different stages of their careers. We have Ibraheem Ali, Sandeep Sanga, and Dominic Tong, who were from the BMS program, who were a postdoc, and from the joint Berkeley UCSF bioengineering program, respectively. And in a few minutes, they'll tell you all about their story and answer some questions. You can see their pictures here. They're not on camera yet, and their preferred method for how to connect with them. One of the purposes of why we bring this program to you is to kind of lower the barrier of being able to contact someone who has a career that you might want to pursue yourself. So you can see each of our panelists here and either their emails or their LinkedIn profiles with whom or by which you can connect with them. And we'll also talk a little bit about another way you can do so as well in a few minutes. So if this is your first time joining us for an Alumni Career Paths session, it's just a little bit about what this is. It is a collaboration between multiple entities at UCSF. I am Mike Matrone from the Office of Career and Professional Development, but I'm joined by representatives from both our office, as well as Black Excellence in STEM, which is a registered campus organization or a student group at UCSF that's focused on highlighting Black scientists and scientists of color to connect them with mentoring, and also co-led by our alumni office, so our alumni relations office at UCSF. And the history of this kind of programming is actually a student-led one. So I think biomedical sciences program students previously led a graduate student-led PhD alumni career series. So that kind of died with the beginning of the pandemic. And so collectively, we decided this was an important program to continue, and we revived it in this form. So, and the why we bring this to you is that we want to highlight that all career paths for PhDs are valid and successful ones. There still remains a bit of a stigma in academia that the only valid or successful career path is to pursue a faculty career. And we want to fight that stigma and highlight that anything that you wish to pursue is a successful career path for you. We also want to highlight that representation matters in all careers. And so we make a strong effort to bring Black scientists and scientists of color to these panels, and so that that you will be able to find someone with whom you identify with, who has shared experiences with you, because that is important to build community, not just in academia, but in any career that you pursue. And like I'd already said before, the purpose is also just to help you connect with people who have careers that you want to pursue. One of the tenets of how we advise students and postdocs to explore careers is to do informational interviews with those who have them. And we hear a lot about the apprehension or the anxiety that comes along with cold contacting someone. And so this program is meant to kind of lower that barrier so that you can see a face and a name and hear from them directly and feel welcomed and able to connect with them afterward. So just a little bit about, and there's one more thing too. We asked all of our panelists for not just this program, but for all panels that we've run in the past, 6 common questions that we focus on, like what are their careers, what are their day-to-day activities or responsibilities, how do they get there? And this lives on our OCPD website and something called the fundamentals, and this QR code and the tiny URL links directly to that. So if you haven't yet, feel free to read their answers. They are all live online, which is where also this recording will be after today's session. So if you have to leave, or you know that somebody who wanted to come to this, feel free to send them this link so that they can follow along and get the same access to this resource as you have. And so just a little overview of what to expect for today's program. We're going to do a little bit of introduction from our 3 panelists. Katie from the Alumni Office will talk to you a little bit about UCSF Connect, which is the other method that you can use to contact UCSF alumni, both student and postdoc. We'll do the moderated Q&A thereafter, and that will end the recorded portion of our session. We'll jump from there into audience Q&A and just have some concluding remarks, and we'll hang at the end in case one of you want to have a more ask your question more privately as opposed to in the open audience. So before I turn the virtual mic over to Katie, I just want to acknowledge all of the people that helped make this program happen, both current and past UCSF members. So members or collaborators from OCPD and CAPES, which is our umbrella group that oversees both our office and the postdoc office, as well as representatives like Jasmine from Black Excellence in STEM, the former leaders of the PhD Alumni Career Series, and then of course, Alumni Relations that helps connect us with our alumni. And so with that, I will say thank you all for coming. I hope that you get what you need out of this program. I will turn it over to you, Katie, and stop sharing so that you can share your screen.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'm going to put in the chat a link to UCSF Connect, as well as a link to a great page on the OCPD website about UCSF Connect, which of course also has a link to the website, but then also has some other good resources that I think are really helpful as you're thinking about using it. And I'm here at UCSF Connect, the website, and just want to give you a quick sort of drive through what the community is. And if I was looking for data scientists in the UCSF Connect directory, how would I do that? So just take a couple minutes to give you a sort of a few pointers in how I'd approach it. It's really easy to sign in or register. You can use LinkedIn, you can use My Access, you create your own password and just use your email. I am using my My Access account to log in, and I'm here on the home page. People will post things in the feed, which is really great. Also want to point out that there are events that are posted about things happening on and around campus. Of course, if you have a student organization or an event that you think you'd like to promote to the larger UCSF Connect community, you are welcome to also post an event. I did want to highlight, I'm going to do open hours, help desk hours this coming Friday from noon to 1. So feel free to come to this event to find the Zoom link and pop in, and you can ask me any questions about UCSF Connect, or we could talk about maybe things that you're wanting to find in there. I also am going to go here over to our groups, and you can see we do have a group called Alumni Career Paths. And in this is members who have previously served as panelists, as well as our team that support this program. And so this is a great way that you could find someone who has previously spoken at an Alumni Career Paths, find their profile and message them. But let me go real quick to the directory, which is sort of the core of this tool. We have over 4,600 users. And if I was to look for data scientists, here's I do a couple different tiered searches. One, I'd go over here on the right side to work experience and go to industry. And not everyone clicks their industry, but data science is one of the options. And so if I click that, there are 18 users that have kind of said, yeah, my industry is data science. So this might be a good place to start. But not everyone clicks industry. So then what I would probably do is go and do a keyword search. And I would try a couple different things. If I do just data, 173 users, that's pretty big. What if I do, data science, 33. Maybe I'll also do an affiliation search. Who's an alum? Who's a postdoc alum? Here's 17 users. Maybe I'd also want to go into University of California and maybe say graduate division. Here's 6 users. So there's a lot of ways that you can start to, narrow your search down. And I definitely recommend, trying some different types of searches. Also try data scientist, 15 users. So it's nice. And this way you won't hopefully get too overwhelmed too fast. But let me show you in a profile. I'm going to find myself. And here I am. And if I wanted to message someone, I could click this message button. I could attach my resume or another document if I wanted to. This message would go to my Gmail inbox where, where my account goes, and then I then respond to you. I've also indicated how I'm willing to help, and two of those ways is a resume or CV review or an introduction to professional connections. And I could also say, write a message here, and again, type that in the box, and it would go to my inbox, and I would respond to you. So I will leave it there as just a quick overview about UCSF Connect, but definitely encourage you to check it out. See who is out there, how they're willing to help, and feel free to reach out to them. And many of our alumni who have volunteered for career paths panels were on UCSF Connect, and we reached out to them and they said yes. And or we found them through LinkedIn. We reached out to them and they said yes. So alumni are here. They're happy to help. They're happy to connect with you, and it's definitely worth the shot. So I'll leave it there, and we'll get to the panel.
Thank you so much, Katie. And yes, certainly to emphasize that as well. Lots of benefits to connecting with alumni who have been where you are now, because it may lead to opportunities that you may not have heard about otherwise. So people find jobs more often through a connection as opposed to just a cold application. So another purpose of a session like this. So with that, why don't we jump into our moderated Q&A? And for the most part, all of these questions are going to be for all of the panelists. And so we'll start in alphabetical order with Ibrahim. So the question is, or the prompt is really just to tell us your career story from graduate school to your current role, emphasizing what you studied, how your training led to your decision to pursue the career that you did, and any other factor that you might feel is important in your story or your decisions to get you to that got you to where you are now. So Ibrahim, I will hand the mic over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. Just as a kind of quick intro, my name is Ibrahim Ali. I'm the Sciences Data Librarian based in the Biomedical Library at UCLA. So I went to grad school at UCSF starting in 2013. I came in straight from undergrad, and I graduated in 2018, right at the end of the year. And I did a short postdoc as a transition from 2018 until 2019 in the same lab. So I worked in Dr. Melanie Ott's lab at the Gladstone Institutes. And I was in the biomedical sciences program, primarily studying transcription and epigenetics in a variety of contexts. As many of you know, you handle several different research projects over the time in grad school. So I definitely transitioned from project to project. I would say the most pivotal, so I did a bit of molecular biology and bioinformatics in work over the course of the years. But I would say the most kind of trajectory altering point for me was when I started working with the library student advisory committee. So there's just a committee of students who give advice to the library at UCSF. And I showed up to every meeting and had an opinion. And so I was asked to join the committee to appoint the university librarian and associate vice chancellor, now Chris Schaefer. And then because of just the ability to work with committees and people in higher positions, they asked me to sit on COLASC, the Committee on Library and Scholarly Communication. And so I did each of those for 18 months to 24 months each. I started very early in my second years when I started working with the library, but all of these kind of helped hone the trajectory. I initially wanted to go in as a publisher or an editor at a journal. I interviewed at Nature Micro, Molecular Cell, and worked with people at PLOS quite a bit. But I eventually decided that more in alignment with my values was working with the library and making sure that people had access rather than withholding access by paywalls and article processing charges and all the ways in which the scientific publishing field is completely distorted. And so yeah, those are kind of learning through that process is how I ended up coming across this position at the UCLA Library, where they were really looking for someone with biomedical sciences background who had experience with scholarly communication work. And I discovered pretty early on that it was a really good fit. And yeah, last like little bits of factors that are useful in this role, definitely getting a chance to write literature reviews in grad school. Those were way more important to me than publishing actual research papers. And then helping with peer review, actually reviewing other people's papers was a really, really critical skill. Being able to evaluate other people's work and contextualize it and create perspectives around it. So all those things were super important as I found this role as a data librarian at UCLA.
Thank you, Ibrahim. So Sandeep, could you go next? And you were at UCSF as a postdoc, but if you could start your story from when you were a graduate student.
Sure thing. So I did my graduate training at University of Texas, Austin, and like we have at UCSF, sort of that joint program between UCSF and Berkeley. Similar sort of concepts going on in Texas. And I think I was sharing with some of you earlier, I'm kind of a California kid, born and raised. So to find myself in Texas was a little bit odd, but I chased a professor over there. But what I found that was really nice was the collaboration between the medical center in Houston and UT Austin and a number of other institutions in Texas. So I did a lot of my research as part of my PhD with MD Anderson Cancer Center. So I physically lived in Houston while having my degree come through UT Austin, but worked with a number of institutes in the area, including the School of Health Information Sciences and a number of other ones that are kind of UT affiliated. My training was very multidisciplinary, spent time in the wet lab, but the real goal was to build computational models of cancer, and parameterizing those models and feeding it with data was really the theme. And I did work kind of with all sorts of data sources that you can imagine, MRI, mouse models and watching tumors grow in behind the windows of in the mouse, cell-based assays all the way down to proteomic and RNA and DNA, different profiles with different assays. So I think the theme there is I was very data hungry. I think many of us are. And I enjoyed the computer science piece of the equation, is how do you automate and make sense of data faster and faster. And I really didn't realize it until till I started doing it. Was really the light went on in my head, and I got a lot of passion out of writing code and really making things a lot faster and simpler and cheaper and whatnot in many ways. And so that's kind of what drove me to, believe it or not, I went to law school after I finished my graduate school training. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my career. I felt a lot of imposter syndrome, and I don't know if any of you feel that, but when I did my PhD, I kind of I knew I didn't want to be a professor. I didn't want to pursue the assistant professor track and that angle. I had a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, I believe, because what I didn't mention is I did a lot of side internships along the way. I did part-time work with Affymetrics as a PhD student. I developed a lot of external mentors outside of great mentors I had within the academic environment. And yeah, I mean, I developed a sense of imposter syndrome a bit, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I took the LSAT along the way, kept my options open. So I think I'm a very much keep the doors open and try as much as you can, especially earlier on in your career when you have the time and the bandwidth, and use that information and experience to kind of guide your choices along the way. I think we all know this implicitly as a data scientist, but you believe it or not, I don't think many of us naturally do that with our career. So that's something that I kind of did organically, if you will. So that's what led me to law school. I got back to the Bay Area. I took a full scholarship to get back to the Bay Area, and that was probably not the best way to go to law school, because if those of you who know anything about law school, it's sort of torturous, and you kind of want to have more skin in the game than to have a full ride and not really knowing if you're there for a solid reason. So what happened with me is within 6 months, I kind of knew that while I appreciate the law and what it could do for me in my career and working with lawyers, I knew I didn't want to sit on that side of the table, if you will. I kind of liked the science. I liked it kind of resolved my imposter syndrome and I went back to science. I realized this side of the table wasn't for me. Um, I want to be back in science. I want to be more innovation driven. So I went and knocked on some doors at Stanford and UCSF, and a couple of opportunities kind of presented themselves. And the one I kind of latched onto was because of the personality. I joined Prescott Woodruff's lab over in the Parnassus campus, and he kind of saw probably some energy in me and whatnot, and said, "Hey, I think this is the guy who can help digitize our biobank." They were collecting biosamples off clinical studies and linking it to obviously clinical histories that were being collected, but also any other information they can collect. But the real value was in the biospecimens kind of sitting in freezers, and I kind of came in to help work with RAs to digitize it locally and with PCR, run Affymetrix chips. At the time, next generation sequencing was just getting off the ground in many ways, and I got some funding allocated to generate data with UC Davis's sequencing core and get some microRNA profiles done with the small RNA-seq profiles. And so we just kind of generated a lot of data, got it sent over to our lab. We had to set up computational infrastructure, servers. We had to set up platform to house the data, pipelines to kind of process it for folks to use it. I kind of always had this lazy mentality in the sense that I don't want to do something multiple times. So build something that lasts. So it was really about making sure that even if I got hit by a bus or won the lottery, someone can pick up the work. And so that was sort of the notion of, setting up infrastructure, setting up tools that others can use, setting up interfaces that could work for, my PI who may not be very savvy with the computer, with the hands-on, R and programming. So that philosophy is what kind of led me to the next part of my career. And it was just, through networks and having external mentors, I got introduced to a startup company called Ingenuity Systems. They were actually a spin out of Stanford back in the late 90s. And they were looking for someone with informatics skills and sequencing skills to help build a product from scratch, a software product to help link clinical data with genomics data and really bring a TurboTax like experience to the research realm and the medical realm. And so it was a really great experience. We went from just an idea all the way through to go to market with a software product that at best existed in, prior to that, there was tools obviously run on academic servers that you can log into and try to use, but this was a robust product that we took to market. And the skills you develop are, of course, prototyping, innovating, working with customers, trying to figure out their problem, and building something with engineers and commercial folks and whatnot that really can kind of take this to market and have some success. So I did that. Company was acquired along the way by QIAGEN. I did something similar with another startup called StationX. I won't go into details, but it was another cloud-based software for platforming omics and clinical data. That company, excuse me, was acquired by Roche, kind of similar to the time that they acquired Flatiron Health and Foundation Medicine and whatnot. So it became an internal platform for data science and enabling data science for Roche. And believe it or not, I went to SAP after this. So if you're familiar with SAP, it's a big German software company that has no business kind of working in the worlds that I've come from. But what they were looking for was an SME, an expert that understood life sciences and healthcare in ways that a technology company didn't quite understand, and really help lead the go-to-market of some database solutions and whatnot that were being developed for providers and for academic research and for pharma companies and whatnot who I've been working with in my prior roles. And as part of that work, if you've heard of ASCO CancerLink or Flatiron Health or a number of these other companies, what's become sort of a theme is how do you collect real world data and how do you aggregate it in the context of healthcare so that we can make better decisions using information across many patients. And so ASCO was American Society of Cancer Clinical Oncology developing their CancerLink platform. And so I got involved with an innovation project to help build the beginning of that vision to organize and link cancer data from EMRs across many practices into a common platform. And that turned the light bulb in my head that there's something to real world data and how it can drive a lot of use cases in research settings, as well as in health economics research, to early discovery, to drug discovery, to whatnot. And so that's what led me to my current role. I'm currently at Astellas Pharma. I serve in a function where we strategize our data needs and really kind of think about it from identifying needs to sourcing the needs and ultimately platforming it, making sure we have patient privacy and governance models in place to protect the data. And then, of course, I have a team of data scientists and bioinformaticists, computational biologist types that report into me, and also I work with throughout the organization to help utilize this data in the right use cases. So I think when having UCSF training, you guys will probably be most familiar with the notion of, target discovery and diagnostic sort of development, all the way through to sort of target validation, indication kind of selections for the right therapeutic that we're bringing. And a lot of this is built around precision medicine ultimately. So I'm loyal to precision medicine. And so that's kind of my background. I'm happy to speak with any of you offline about my journey. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel.
Thank you, Sandeep. And Dominic, same prompt.
Yeah, so I'm Dominic. I did my PhD in the joint graduate program in bioengineering, so between Berkeley and UCSF. Lived in Berkeley, worked at UCSF with Ryan Hernandez. I did my thesis was in human population genetics, so a lot of computational work in Python on the cluster, which kind of gave me the fundamentals in the coding required for moving into data science. So during my grad school, Ryan actually left UCSF and moved to McGill University in Montreal, which then catalyzed for me thinking about what I wanted to do next, because the academic path seemed to be starting to close because it's harder to publish with your mentor 3 time zones away and in another country. So I came to think about consulting, so management consulting, and also data science. This is where the informational interviews come in, right? This is why OCPD is talks about this so much. But you talk to enough management consultants, you understand that their life it's not a good work-life balance for the most part, and so that kind of shifted me into data science. So after I graduated UCSF, I did the Insight Health Data Science Fellowship. It was a 7-week program, basically to help PhDs kind of figure themselves out and their resumes, and do a small project to get in the door and to introduce you to companies to get you in the door. So you can start your interview. It kind of jumpstarts your interview process for you. And then through that, and through connection within BioE, actually, I reached out to an alumni at the beginning of my job search, and later on she reached back out and said, "Hey, we're hiring. Would you like to interview for this position we have?" And so that's how I ended up as a senior data scientist here at InsightRx. So a little bit about InsightRx. We're a Series A startup, so a very early startup in the precision dosing space, working with both hospitals and pharma companies to accurately dose their patients. So our main product is a web app. You just log into a website. It's kind of like Facebook or Twitter, but instead of crap, you have a way to precisely dose medicines for your patients or your clinical trial members. So that's the very brief story of where I'm coming from, and I, like everyone else, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and always happy to talk more.
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you, Ibrahim and Sandeep. We'll start again with Ibrahim for this next question, but also for everybody is, if you can speak about navigating, this company or client or field spaces with the identity that you hold, and what major challenges did you or have you faced, and what can you inform somebody about that so that they know what to expect?
Thanks. Yeah, this is definitely an interesting question. So one of the kind of key aspects of my role in the library is I kind of think of it as like, in a lot of senses, like consultant work, where someone will come to me with like a research problem, or data that they don't know what to do with. And they're just essentially looking for help to figure out, like, how do we better explore this question? How do we visualize this data? How do we kind of create a story around the research that we're working on? And so one of the things that I really love about that is that generally when people are approaching me, they are like looking for some help, and when you help them, or they've like run out of options in a sense, and when you help them, it's very kind of validating, and it's one of the things that I really appreciate about my job, just helping people like kind of get guided to where they need to go from a research project. Working at an institution like UCLA is kind of a beast. The bureaucracy is pretty horrifying. And the ability to actually like enact change is I mean, extremely slow. Most of the people in my role before me quit after 6 months. And I think I've been in the role longer than anybody else, at almost 3 years now. And I love the role. And part of it is like navigating uncertainty, like being able to navigate uncertainty about the scope of responsibilities, and really being self-driven is something that kind of makes it possible to make it through. I do have, and this is a really important aspect of me being able to like function in my role, is like recognizing my privilege that I bring to the space. I'm working in libraries. You're working in a primarily it's a female dominated field, high representation of LGBT. And so as like a cis het man, it comes with a set of privilege. People listen to me when they don't listen to my more accomplished and more qualified colleagues. And so being aware of that has helped a lot with developing interpersonal relationships, and really understanding and relying on colleagues that I recognize have more experience than I do. The other thing is that I came into a library space where not a lot of PhDs come into a library space, but because librarians are treated in some institutions as less than faculty because they don't have PhDs, there's kind of power dynamics. So I come in at an equal playing field, and so being aware of all of the aspects of my privilege has made it a lot easier to like navigate the relationships at the institution, and just work with people to actually navigate the headache of a bureaucracy that I mentioned earlier. So it's complicated, it's nuanced, because aspects of my role are very fulfilling, and people really love the help that the library is able to give to researchers across campus. And we serve faculty, staff, students, postdocs, like whoever comes to the library needing help from UCLA. So I would say it's kind of like pseudo academic, but yeah, like because of that, but also the need to make the institution keep moving forward, and like be inclusive and useful space for its learners and trainees. There are a lot of challenges. So I hope that answers the question. I think it's a little bit muddled and complicated, just given the nature of the role. But yeah, that's what I got.
Navigating like stifling bureaucracy is something that certainly resonates with me. So thank you for saying that as well. Same question to you, Sandeep.
So in my career, I've had experiences in startup environments. I've been in kind of mid-size environments, and at SAP and Astellas, these are global multinational corporations. So I've had sort of that big company, if you will, experience that Ibrahim was sort of alluding to. What I'll say is, in the startup kind of environment, I think we all know it's like the closest thing to being in academia from an innovation perspective. You get to kind of, in a lot of ways, control your destiny. You're obviously at the mercy of a clock a lot more. There's only so much ramp you have and runway you have in terms of funding and all this to get certain amount of work done. But I think that's the experiences that you develop trying to innovate yourself, punch yourself out of a bag, are probably better than any schooling can possibly teach you, I think, to some extent, from an experience standpoint. So I'd say the tough part about being in a startup, though, is you're against the clock. The hours can be terrible, especially if you're very invested in it. You off, it's pretty rare that you have like promotions just handed to you and stuff in a startup environment. Usually it's a flat org, and you have to be sort of comfortable with, you're more about the role and you can kind of change roles and all that. But if you're looking for titles, that's going to be a tough sell unless you kind of start at the very top and found the company and whatnot. But it's not impossible. I'm just suggesting that that's a difficult path to kind of navigate if you're not a non-founder but highly impactful, if you will, at a company. And I would imagine all of you would be if you joined a startup. And that kind of experience has taught me that usually the opportunities lay outside your current company. So you have to be sort of, willing to try something new and potentially exit something you love to try, something new. And I think the skill you got to develop, in my opinion, is how to not burn bridges on your way out of things and, and whatnot, because things can come off the wrong way and all this by just, exiting something and moving on to the next. So finding a way to maintain relationships while, being loyal to your career is something that comes with experience, but I'm suggesting that it's something you focus on while you're early in your career, because it's something that I had to kind of deal with along the way. And I mean, I've even had difficult relationships with like CEOs of startups and had to find a nice way to exit and have that person be my reference not too far down the future and all that. So this is just something I would encourage all of you to think about as you're kind of navigating startups and the next steps. The other thing I would say in like big company environments, it's quick, it's you get more tied to a role. And people like ourselves, data science is like obviously becoming a very vogue topic in a lot of companies now. So there are a lot of data science functions or data science like functions. It gets mixed up a lot with statistics, and I think it's unfair to call everything data science machine learning. So you're going to have to kind of navigate the nouns and verbs a bit and what you truly are and what you believe yourself to be. I wear a lot of hats, like in my roles. There's a business mindset, there's a executive mindset, a people manager perspective. But I think the thing that I stay true to is that I'm a scientist first. So I'm trying to solve a problem. And I think if you can kind of figure out what you are across these various things, then have that be your guiding light, your career will go where you need it to. Whereas if you just kind of try to be something you're not, you'll end up competing with people that actually are that wolf. If you think of wolf packs, you're going to find yourself in a situation where it's tough. And big companies, one thing I'll just throw out there as a final thought is there's always reorganizations happening. A lot of it's irrational. Try not to be logical about everything. These are not, you can't just talk your way out of stuff and hope that everyone's just listening to reason. It's not a democracy in big corporations. There are other reasons things happen. There are politics, there are power plays. So just be aware that this stuff exists, not just in academia, but in big corporate world too, and expect it. And, I think leadership, part of it is you demonstrate leadership by taking change and kind of being a stabilizing force through the change. I think some reactions I've had in my career that I've adjusted is when change happens, like go find another job or go find something new and escape the issue. And that's one way to approach it. I just don't think that's the way that you build the strong relationships and build your career. I think showing that in the face of change, you can kind of, be a bridge builder, and you can kind of navigate your team through the rough waters. That's how leadership qualities are sort of developed, if that's something that matters to all of you as you grow your career. So these are just some things of realities I wanted to share, and we can talk about other things in the follow-on questions. But thanks for the time on this one.
Thank you so much. And Dominic.
Michael, could you remind me what the question is?
Of course, it is. Can you speak about navigating a company or client or spaces in the field that with the identity that you hold?
Sure.
What challenges did you face, and what can those entering this field expect?
Yeah. So I'll start with myself, right? I'm a senior data scientist at InsiderX. So in my role, I like to say I'm part data scientist and part actual scientist, because we do work on pharmacological models and developing new models based on the data we have, and collecting, and then pushing that out to our clinician providers and to our pharma partners as well. There's a lot of work with the executive teams at the C-level. They want to know how the business is doing, how our clinical metrics are going, so I provide that. Our customer success teams work a lot with the hospital providers, and so we're feeding them data too to help them do their work. So that's on the company front. On the client front, obviously, we have where our hospital providers and our pharma research partners also work on some university collaborations as well. So those aren't very different from the academic sort of community that you're currently in. And then in terms of the field, as I said, I'm also a scientist too, right? So I am publishing, I am going out to, well, not during the pandemic, but I am going to go to conferences soon, hopefully. And so it's kind of a hybrid role that I'm in, which is very cool, and it's sort of unique. It's a little bit harder to find. So that's kind of my role. The way I see stepping one step out with data science. Data science has become like an umbrella term for a lot of different things, like Sandeep mentioned, right? There's the analytics function where you're just, well, not just, but you're kind of converting data into actual useful information for decision makers. So that's, like a COVID dashboard would be an example of this, or kind of understanding how fast a certain test is being processed through the pipeline. So that's kind of one role. Another role is a machine learning engineer, I would say, where you're taking data and you're actually building models and trying to understand, input output. You've got roles like mine where it's more scientist, but because data science is such in vogue, you want to call it something cooler so that you attract candidates. You don't just call it, scientist one or scientist two or whatever a boring old pharma company would call it. And I mean, there's many more different roles within the umbrella of data science. So you really have to understand what role you're trying to go for, and then figuring out from reading the job description, from talking to people, whether that's actually something you want to be pursuing or not. Because different companies brand their data scientists in different ways. And then one last thought here is a little bit pushing back on what Sandeep said there. Startups are very flat. There's no doubt about that. So you all talk, very equally. There's no level of like intimidation or super respect for the co-founders at the C-level, right? We're all equals. We're all just trying to push this company forward because there's only so many hands to go around and so much money that we have to make our goals happen. But the titles thing is, I feel like the titles are a little bit more fluid within a startup. So you kind of can pick and choose which title you want because nobody actually cares what your title is. They mostly care that you can do the job and that you can do not just your job, but all these adjacent jobs where you may or may not be called upon to just jump on it and then put out that fire. So just a slight bit of pushback there from my perspective in the startup world. And I'll stop there so we can keep going with the questions because I know we got 9 of them.
Thank you all for that. I'm going to pivot a little bit to something that's Ibrahim mentioned, and that is your values, but making values-based decisions. It's something that we emphasize all the time in OCPD when we meet with a student postdoc, mainly because you may find a career that uses skills you like and it's of interest to you, but if it's a place not aligned with your values, you're going to hate your life. And so I'd like to, starting with Ibrahim, I'd like to ask, like, as a graduate student and for Sandeep as a postdoc at UCSF, like, what were your values then? What values were met in your first role after you left, which were not? And then how has and over time, how have your values changed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've always been a pretty value driven person, and so I struggled a lot with like dealing with various aspects and priorities of industry and like the financial motivation behind research projects and publishing. And so early on in grad school, I kind of recognized the importance of communicating to like the general public about like public health related issues, and how I felt very strongly that like more politicians needed to be scientists. Like that was my like big thing when I before I started grad school. I was like, I'm going to go to grad school, I'm going to go to law school, and then I'm going to go become a politician. Of course, that did not end up being my career path. Um, but it really taught me kind of the importance of especially like interpersonal communication and working with people to achieve like greater goals. And as I navigated graduate school, I learned about grant writing and got, wrote a variety of grants, wrote a variety of papers, published in a variety of spaces. And also like the pressure to publish in certain spaces over others was something that that I thought was like really funny, the way that my PI prioritized certain things over others. And I get it, like the whole process of publishing in a prestigious journal. But that was really off-putting to me, to read, really crappy Cell papers, and then suddenly people are like, Cell is the best journal. Or that's just one example. It could be any one of the one-word journals. But yeah, and so kind of navigate those. I realized that making sure that people had access to information, access to quality research is really important to me. And so ultimately, that's what drove me to working with the library and working at UCLA Library. And I would say that my values are largely consistent. I'm still I would say like at least 40% of my role is working with researchers, trying to convince them to publish their data openly for data that they can publish, openly, and kind of making, helping people realize that, making the research transparent and accessible is the way to actually be inclusive, and how we deconstruct the ivory tower and make sure that people who are systemically excluded can actually be included in these systems. So yeah, that's what keeps me in the role. I would love to get paid a little bit more for what I do. And that's kind of my main motivation for maybe moving into the private sector.
So we
But
all
I'm happy. I mean, I'm happy. So like, I'd rather, oh, and the other thing is that I have free time. Like I have really best work-life balance I've ever had since grad school. So like, I'm happy I have work-life balance. Like I would take a pay cut for that any day. so uh, so that's just me. That's my values. I'll hand it over to someone with a different perspective.
Um, yeah, I think the way I'd answer that question, in a lot of ways, very similar, Ibrahim. But I might add and just say, like, when I was in grad school and in my postdoc, um, I was just, I think one thing that's true throughout my career is I'm very customer obsessed. It's like I know who my customer is or who I'm trying to help. Everything emanates from that, and it's like, solve their problem. What's the problem? How do I hack my way to a solution? And I think, like a Silicon Valley person, you kind of run fast and get to the solution. And I would say that part of me has evolved a bit throughout my career. It's you know and early on, it's about getting the experience and figuring out how to get through the jungle. Now it's more about what's the right way to get through, and not maybe cause an ancillary fire somewhere and whatnot. There's a little bit more experience under my belt, but there's also kind of that transition from like an academic environment where you're you're pretty much open to using a lot of things. Like everything's kind of at your disposal. You have every tool, even commercial software is pretty much handed to you for free. Data is not something you buy typically. You're usually generating, funding it yourself, through grants or whatever, or you're accessing all the free data that's available. But I can tell you, like, I'm just going to fast forward till today. A lot of that stuff is not, I don't have the same access that I used to have. And you have to kind of be used to not running as fast, and you have to be used to kind of going through privacy concern reviews, and there's a governance process in the mix, and you can use data in certain ways and not other ways. And so there's all this stuff that kind of comes with moving into a corporate environment. And I hire people all the time out of academic environments and, out of their first job even. And that's a struggle when they enter into sort of big corporate, whether it's pharma or a diagnostic or anything. And that's the kind of thing that I've had to kind of, take, I've been in both seats, and I have to kind of help the journeys of folks that are kind of going through it. And so my values have sort of evolved to being more about doing things, quote unquote, the right way for my corporation that I work for, because I'm a citizen of the company as well as kind of the world. And so there's a lot of what's the ethical way to do things, what's the right way to do things within our governance structure and corporate structure, as well as what can't we use. So a good example might be, I can't go download a tool, use it on my personal laptop, test it out, make sure it works, and then go to my IT group and say, now I need that tool. Like, that might seem like a natural workaround, but there's a certain unethicalness to that. The way we do it now is you go to your IT folks, make sure they put the tool in the right sandbox, and it slows you down. Productivity is at mercy all of a sudden, but that's part of like life in my current role and being a good citizen for the company. So I would just say that there's trade-offs, right? If you leave academia or you leave a startup where you can kind of run faster, there are always trade-offs, and just be cognizant of that. And if you jump into roles where there are more guardrails around you, it doesn't mean things are impossible, but you got to be part of that solution of expanding the guardrails and whatnot. And that's kind of how my own values have changed from being kind of run fast and find the solution to be more about what's the game I'm playing. I'm not playing, NBA basketball like I thought I was on the court near my house, or sorry, street ball near the court of my house. I got to play within the context of the rules of the game that I'm playing. So that's just something I would share with everybody, has been my experience.
Yeah. So values wise, I think I started out always with the truth, right? We're scientists. We're pursuing the truth as far as we can see it, right? With reality, and kind of interacting with reality to try to figure out something about reality so that we can share with the world. So that's kind of where I'm starting from, right? Speak the truth. And then I think moving into this role right now, I think the value that I've added is what Sandeep said, which was to be more customer oriented. So not just thinking about what is the absolute capital T truth, but also how do I help other people use what I know, or use what I've learned, or use what I've built, or what we've built to kind of move and improve people's health. So kind of being more customer oriented that way. I think those are the two major pillars of what what I value now, which is seek the truth, speak the truth, and then be customer oriented and figure out solutions for them, and help people move towards either improving human health or finding their own truth.
Thank you, all of you. Looking at the time, I think we may get through maybe one or two more questions, but I'll focus on this next one. Is thinking about the skills that you learned when you were a graduate student or postdoc. What skills from that training do you use regularly, and what did you need to learn that graduate school or postdoc didn't teach you? And again, starting with Ibrahim.
Yeah, that's a good question. At least for my current role, definitely the process of collecting and analyzing data, and applying it to not just my research question, but like being able to apply it broadly to any research question that comes across my desk or my space, I think is really useful. Just by the nature of my role, I tend to get more questions about yeah, things like statistics. So actually, like the hard skills are actually really transferable, especially relating to data analysis. I would say things that I needed to learn. One really kind of, I think, important component, and then this has been mentioned a few times, just in terms of like working with people managing, things like that, is definitely like I feel like in graduate school and even in my short postdoc, a lot of the work that I was doing, while it did involve other people, was very individually driven. And now I work as a team on basically all of the major projects that I have going on at the library. So definitely being able to work with like work with a team and actually work with people who may or may not be good project managers themselves. So like being able to set the scope, like who is going to be doing what, being organized about like the information that we have and that we're working with. All of these things were little things that I like picked up over time in grad school. Like I learned to manage my own data because I messed up in my first year and second year, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I lost a bunch of data. And so so like little things like that are ended up being like way more transferable. But especially the people managing, both managing up and managing horizontally, I think is really useful. And just being like, I don't know, I'm like very systematic and organized with time and like who does what. And whenever you're working on projects, there's always like some sort of, I don't know, maybe not, it's not every time, but it's not usually an even distribution of the workload. And so so being able to like, you know, make that as smooth as possible and understand people's strengths, all like really transferable, useful skills coming out of grad school.
Thank you so much, Sandeep.
Yeah, I think like there's a couple of buckets obviously, but the technical skills that like I picked up during my postdoc, you know, but prior to my postdoc, I never used R. I was writing, you know, in other languages prior to that, like C and Perl and whatnot. But R was starting to become, and it has become the de facto, along with Python, you know, the language to know as a data scientist. So, you know, picking up that skill set was mission critical for a data science career. So I think that was extremely valuable. And I think many of you would agree that, you know, you need to know the right languages at the right time. They're constantly evolving. Setting up infrastructure. I mean, I was responsible for setting up some, you know, computing environments and whatnot. So that was a skill set. I think the part that I don't want to like hang on any one assay, but I think the scientific odyssey, just being able to learn how the industry is evolving and what's the new assay, how do you get it generated, staying a little bit on the bleeding edge. So like in my case, it was microRNA-seq, a small RNA-seq protocol run on the Illumina platform that was like brand spanking new. No one had ever generated that data really and never really processed it. So just kind of being comfortable with a little bit of being in the unknown. But the reality is, you know, getting data and wrangling through it, engineering your way through it is just something that I picked up in grad school and a postdoc, so that in my career, I'm just not scared, right? When something new comes along, you're not scared anymore. And I think that's what a PhD and postdoc, et cetera, are really about. You don't have fear going into the next problem. Um, I think some of to move to like, what did I learn that maybe not necessarily wasn't there in grad school is like, I think sort of the meet people where they are. You know, when you're in grad school and in postdoc, everyone around you is sort of pretty geeky, right? You're around a lot of people that just kind of know your space, your field, a lot of what you're saying from a, you know, if you start geeking out on some biology mechanism, target, whatever it might be, a lot of people around you are sort of at a similar level. But in your big corporate environment, and you know, not everyone understands what you're saying at any I mean, you're speaking foreign languages, Klingon and all this. So there's this need to sort of, you know, bring people and level set them appropriately, be comfortable with starting from ground zero a lot. And there's this concept called change management that I never even heard about till I was in a big organization. And that is, there's constantly something new coming about, but you know, just like I have young kids, they're not used to change. Like they want to, you know, they're used to structure and schedule. And if something's going to come and change, you have to kind of bring everyone along to the new process and the new schedule and everything. So being sort of savvy about, you know, that is not something I picked up much in grad school, because you're just running fast, you're solving your own problems. But when you get into like people management roles and interfacing with large teams and whatnot, there's a lot of different changes happening all at once. So you got to organize the chaos a bit and make sure everyone's sort of level set along the way. So that's a skill set that I had to pick up kind of later in life, because it wasn't natural. It wasn't picked up in school. So these are just a couple of things I wanted to share with you, little tidbits.
Thank you so much. And Dominic.
Yeah. So skills. Well, my PhD, I use a lot of Python. We're actually in R shop, so the knowing the right language at the right time. Part of that is just luck, right? You luck into a lab that uses Python, then you know Python, then you can go pick up R. So on the hard skill side, that's definitely one I had from grad school that just kept going. To dive a little bit into detail on that, there are some other things where like I definitely don't know. So as a data scientist, there's also an aspect of computer science or software engineering, right? If you think of like a software developer at, let's say, at Google or something, they have an entirely different set of tools where they're doing a lot of Git, version control, and sort of actual engineering practices on their code, which I didn't do in academia, right? I just pushed code up and it worked or it didn't work, and that was it. But here, right, even at a startup, we have a lot more control and versioning practices and engineering practices put in to make sure that the code we write is actually, you know, up to par, that it's tested, that it's modular, that it's all of these things that are good software. So that's sort of the hard skill side. And on the softer skill side, I think it's very easy to communicate within a lab because, well, I don't know about the pandemic situation, but back when I was going through grad school, we saw each other every day for, you know, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and so it's very easy to talk to people within that situation. But even working at a startup, there are people that I don't know quite as well, and so it's harder to reach out to them, and then it's even harder to reach out to the external community because, like Sandeep said, they're coming from a different background, they're coming from a different place than you are, so you have to figure out where they're coming from and sort of reach out and then get there. Where that doesn't have to happen necessarily if you're just talking in lab or if you're talking to people within your field at a conference, right? You're all still coming to that field, to that conference, to that meeting with a similar background. And then one other thing I'll say is the pace. And so in academia, you know, you do experiments, you fail, you try again, you fail again, maybe you take a little bit of a breather, you go do something else, and then you come back to it. Where I am now, that's sometimes not an option, right? Sometimes we do need that product out. We do need that experiment done. We do need whatever it is done, and it's time sensitive. So there's a certain pace element to it where having that mental fortitude to just grind through it, and you develop this during your PhD and your postdoc, right? You have that fortitude to just grind through the problem, just to keep going, to keep trying new ideas, to keep trying new things, to get it to succeed. So that's definitely something that I started to pick up during my PhD, but I've really kind of honed it in my current role.
Thank you to all of you. And I'm going to ask one more question, and that is related to like what I often hear is like, what's the career progression for someone who would follow in this path? And so for all of you, are you where you want to be? Or if not, what do you think comes next? What's your next steps? And if you don't know that answer for yourself right now, what are the common next steps for someone in data science?
I would say, I think mine is probably the most, I mean, I would consider my role to be like pseudo academic. but in certain settings, librarians can become like faculty appointed and are tenured track. So like librarians at UCLA are tenured track, and or they have like something called career status, which is very similar to tenure. I got career status after 2 years in the library, and I could, if I wanted, stay 50 years in this role, like some of my counterparts. I don't want to do that. It's really early in my career still, and I think that I want to spend a little bit of time either going into a more industry-focused role or more kind of public services role of some sort. And so I think that I don't know like what the next steps would be, but I think maybe working as a data scientist in a company might be some type of thing, or maybe working in government in some way, applying data analysis to policy decisions is, you know, things that are definitely of interest to me. So who knows if it's actually something that's going to happen, but I imagine, you know, throw out some applications, speak with some people. It's all, for me, it's like ultimately I feel like do a little bit of networking and I'll find the next path. But yeah, if I wanted, I could stay in this role for a really long time. So so I think my life ultimately, like the life I create outside of my career, can help guide like where I ultimately end up.
You know, like technology, I think data science is one of these things. If you lead your career with technology and data science, you pretty much find yourself in any job, any industry, not any job, sorry, any industry, and possibly tackling problems that are on one hand, you know, commercial in nature, and others might be very, you know, let me crack the mysteries of the universe, right? So there's a lot of places you could take data science and technology. So one thing I'm pretty loyal to is I know I'm going to be in the life sciences healthcare industry no matter what I do. It's kind of like one aspect. And I think a lot of UCSF folks feel the same way because it's the nature of UCSF and what we do there and train in. But I think that's something that I know is always going to be part of my next step in my career. And I'm very loyal to the topic of precision medicine, personalized medicine, if you will. Like to me, you know, everything that I want to work on is getting to that holy grail that, you know, like my father passed away of undiagnosed cancer, and you're kind of like, I want him to be at least have been diagnosed, given the right treatment, all this stuff. And we all have this story. So there's this mission that you can define for yourself. And then I always think about my career as is if an opportunity comes along the way, is that aligning with my mission better than where I'm currently at or not? Excuse me. So, I mean, to me, it's like have a personal mission and have your career sort of align with that. And it hopefully is where you're currently sitting. But if it's not, try to make the appropriate changes to make that alignment. And in some cases, you can influence your current organization to go that direction. Sometimes it's not so easy, so you might have to look to other spots. And maybe I'm a little bit more um, willing to try new things than the average person, but I've been in technology companies trying to be a life science healthcare expert and drive things. I've been in, you know, now a pharma company. I've been in diagnostics and software startups, but it's all been on the same journey. So I think that's just been my way of pursuing it. So I would encourage you guys to think of it in some way, build a development plan, and work with it with your mentors and your advisors, and your boss even, right? Because that's the way your career moves, is by being open, transparent with the people that you work for and with, and they help you on your journey. That's kind of how I go about it. And that's what I do with my own people that I report into me. It's important for me to cultivate their career. And, you know, that's the way I go about it.
This one's a little hard for me to answer. Again, super early in my career. I am pretty sure this isn't the ultimate goal. I don't see myself doing this for the next 40 years or whatever. But in terms of exactly what happens next, that's hard to say. I think it's just important to know what that mission is. So my mission is to improve human health, essentially. no matter what form that takes. So that's very wide open. And so, you can just go see what opportunities are out there and take them or not take them as you see fit. In terms of actual just career progressions, kind of stepping a little bit further into the detail, right? In terms of data science careers, usually you start as a data scientist, get senior data scientist, or whatever those levels look like, and then there's a bifurcation, right, where you start becoming more like just an individual contributor, a technical lead, right, a lead data scientist or a principal data scientist, something like that. So sort of that direction, and then more towards management. So you can be a data science manager, a director of data science, that sort of thing. So it's sort of at a more granular level. That's kind of what it looks like. You start here, and then there's a bifurcation of you go be a technical expert in whatever you're doing, or you go be a people manager and a data scientist at the same time. So there's kind of a bifurcation of the exact role and the exact thing that you're doing. At least that's what I see from where I sit right now. But in terms of the ultimate objective, I don't think there isn't necessarily one. It's just do the opportunities come up. If it's cool, go do it. If it's not cool, don't do it. And you can always tell the story in reverse. That's what I've realized is you can always tell a great story about what you've done, but you can never tell the story about what's going to happen, because that's just a bunch of random opportunities that you don't know even exist yet. So yeah.
Thank you very much to the three of you. This will end the recorded portion of this session. So thank you for watching. If you are watching this after this event happens, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our panelists or to OCPD directly, and we'd be happy to address them.